Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us today in this webinar on PPAs, or Power Purchase Agreements. In today's ever-shifting energy landscape, the stability of energy prices is not just a concern, it's also a necessity for businesses aiming to thrive. This webinar, titled "How Can PPAs Successfully Stabilize Your Energy Prices?" we will go through how PPAs can offer a strategic advantage by ensuring price stability, while also providing sustainability benefits. My name is Sebastian Waldenström, and I've been working over 20 years in the energy industry on strategy, transactions, and transformations, including PPAs. And to my right, I have
Oskar Lindström. I've been in the energy industry for 8 years, 2.5 years roughly with PwC, focusing on strategy and transaction projects within the energy space.
And during this session, you will be able to ask questions via this QR code. Please scan it and keep this site open if you come up with questions during the presentation. We will also display the QR code throughout the webinar. We will both answer questions directly at the end of this webinar and also via the chat. First, a few words about PwC. PwC is a global advisory firm with some 370,000 employees and 8,000 employees in the Nordics working on advisory, assurance, and tax matters.
So going through the agenda of today, first we will cover some of the basics of a PPA. So what is a PPA, different contract types, and what impacts the price and current market trends. Then we will move on to some of the risks and benefits with PPAs. After that, we'll move on to some insights that we have gathered through our projects and market interactions. And lastly, we'll go through some key takeaways and some Q&As. So moving on then to what is a PPA? A PPA is, or power purchase agreement, is a long-term contract, typically between 5 to 20 years, for delivery of electricity. We see a market standard of around 10 years, but it can vary a lot. And this contract ensures that both parties, both the seller and the off-taker, so the buyer, can plan for the future with some certainty with regards to electricity prices. The off-taker is generally any entity that consumes a significant amount of electricity, and the seller is typically a electricity producing company. So the whole purpose with a PPA is to provide stable electricity prices, so avoiding volatility. And it can also provide some important sustainability advantages, such as additionality that we will come to later. And if we move over to the right-hand side here of the pictures, we'll talk about different PPA types. We have two what we call bookend types of PPAs, which is baseload contract and the pay-as-produced contract. We also have pay-as-forecasted, which is a bit of a hybrid between those two. But if we dive a little bit deeper into these two types of contracts, we on the one side of the book, so the one bookend is baseload contract. In this type of contract, the seller commits to providing a fixed volume of electricity over a set period, regardless of how much is actually produced by the renewable asset or the energy asset. This means that the seller takes on most of the volume risk, so meaning the risk if the wind doesn't blow or the sun doesn't shine enough, for example, they still have to deliver the agreed amount of electricity. often buying the difference on the spot market. This price, so the price risk then is also higher for the seller in this in a baseload contract, especially if prices, market prices spike during periods when there is low production. So for buyers, the big advantage here is predictability. You know exactly how much energy you will get and how much you will pay for it, which makes budgeting easy. However, this certainty typically comes also with a price. So higher contract price since the seller is taking so much risk. So if we move on to the lower part of the picture here, so pay as produced PPAs. Here the off-taker agrees to buy all the electricity that's actually produced from the seller, or at least to follow the profile of the generating asset. So regardless of when the electricity is produced, the off-taker agrees to consume it or take it. So if there's a lot of wind or sun, you get more energy, and if there's less, you get less. And this then has as a consequence that the volume risk sits with mostly the buyer, because you're taking whatever is generated. Price risk is shared, since market prices can be higher or lower than your agreed PPA price. And this structure is often preferred for variable renewable assets. And it tends to be priced lower than baseload contracts because the buyer is accepting more of the production risk. So speaking then of what impacts different, or the PPA price in the end, we spoke about the type of PPA influencing, so baseload versus pay-as-produced PPA has an impact. Market timing can also play a crucial role. So what the market prices are when entering into or when negotiating a PPA contract can have an impact. The price area is also important. In Sweden, for example, we have 4 different price areas, with prices typically being higher in the south and lower in the north. So this then also has an impact on the PPA pricing. Size of the contract also matters, so how much annual volume you agree to pay or sell, but also the tenure, so how long, for how long you commit. And then also terms and conditions. So we mentioned volume and price risk. These risks can be embedded in a lot of different contract clauses. There can also be other risks in these contracts that then affect the final price. Generation technology, so depending if it is, for example, onshore, offshore wind or solar or hydropower, has an impact on the price. And also inclusion of guarantees of origin, which is essentially a verification of renewable electricity origin that can be either included or excluded from the PPA contract. So understanding these components is vital for strategic decision making in both selecting and negotiating PPAs. So if we move on to some trends.
Yes, so we see several current trends on the European PPA market. First one is that there is a record deal making with lower volumes. So in 2024, we actually saw that the European PPA market had a record number of deals, 316 long-term PPAs, which is actually an uptick of 14% year on year. But the total contracted volume actually decreased by 11% since the previous year. So what actually happened is that utilities typically pulled back with a quite significant drop of 59% in disclosed volumes compared to the previous year, while corporates drove activity with smaller and more conservative deals, keeping the total volume more balanced. The other trend is that negative price events and lower capture rates have been more prevalent. So negative electricity prices is something that has been spoken about for a long time, and we've also seen occurrences of that in previous years, but this has become even more commonplace in 2024 and 2025. And these events are driven by high renewable generation, typically from solar and wind, during periods of low demand, causing an oversupply and therefore price cannibalization. The third trend is that I think the Nordic PPA market remains a buyer's market. So, sorry, I need to go back on that one. Where do we have that? We have negative prices and lower capture rates. Another consequence there is that sort of lower capture prices for the producers, meaning that they earn less compared to the average market, especially the case for solar and wind producers, as simultaneous production pushes prices down during peak generation hours. And there is an increased risk and volatility have made pricing and risk allocation a little bit more complex in the PPA market, with buyers and sellers negotiating how to handle negative price hours. And here, external advisors can be useful in finding common ground between seller and off-taker. The third trend that we see is that the Nordic PPA market, I think, remains a buyer's market. So with quite strong negotiating power on the buyer side. We also see hybrid solutions like solar in combination with storage becoming more commonplace. And this offers new ways for parties to reduce the risk and optimize the cost. And overall, I think market conditions remain quite favorable for buyers despite these market uncertainties.
So moving on then to some of the risks and benefits with PPAs. And here we're talking primarily from a buyer's perspective. We see that economic and environmental advantages are two key buckets of advantages. So if we start from the financial objectives and advantages, we see that PPAs provides significant benefits. And they can be especially valuable in a volatile energy market. So for CFOs or financial managers, the appeal is in achieving long-term price stability, and they can actually be quite a cost-effective way of securing your energy cost over a long period of time. On the sustainability side, PPAs also carry significant benefits. So they can align with environmental initiatives and regulatory requirements, which is important for those of you listening who manage corporate responsibility and brand image. So also marketing managers and sustainability officers will appreciate how PPAs contribute to reducing the company's carbon footprint, typically specifically by lowering the Scope 2 emissions of a company. And by securing renewable energy, these agreements can support additionality, which is a key concept in the industry, meaning that new energy projects can be developed as a result of a PPA being signed. And this can really enhance a company's sustainability profile. We also see that PPAs can have a positive impact on local communities. So supporting renewable projects locally can help build community relationships and reinforces the company's commitment to broader societal goals. So in summary, PPAs offers a lot of advantages across many different company roles, ensuring both financial objectives and sustainability goals are met effectively. And now we move over to some public examples of companies that have signed PPA contracts and how they position this. So first of all, we have Arla as an example. This is a company that has ambitious plans for its renewable energy sourcing. And so aside from having solar parks at their dairies, they also have procured large PPAs, supporting the aim to procure 100% renewable energy by this year, 2025. And they have procured solar PPAs specifically, which will help them reduce Scope 2 emissions, which in their context is typically emissions from use of electricity. We can see how they use this for their marketing through various communication channels. And through this, they position themselves as a leader in sustainable dairy production. And if we move over to the second example, which is Axfood, they've pursued a lot of initiatives, primarily within solar, so including sourcing electricity from the largest solar park in Sweden, but also having rooftop solar on their warehouse facilities. Their PPA contracts are, they market them a lot in press releases and in news updates. And they highlight these projects as key milestones in their sustainability journey. And thirdly, we have Borealis, which is a chemical company that has signed PPAs to source renewable power in Sweden, such as with Vattenfall, for example. And here it is not only with not only with solar, but with hydropower, but also wind power. And they specifically highlight the lowering of Scope 2 emissions as being a key advantage with these PPAs. So each of these companies effectively markets their PPA endeavors using different communication channels and highlighting it in their annual and sustainability reports, which then can enhance their brand image and corporate responsibility narratives.
And as we explore financial risks and market volatility within PPAs, it's essential to consider the nature of pay-as-produced contracts. When discussing volume and generation, pay-as-produced contracts do present some challenges due to the inherent variability of renewable energy sources like wind and solar. And this means that the electricity delivered might vary, potentially not matching exactly the consumption needs of the off-taker at all times. However, this challenge also presents an opportunity for innovation and smarter energy management. It presents an opportunity to implement adaptive energy management strategies for off-takers that do possess that ability, depending on, of course, on the energy needs and the flexibility in the production, for example, of the off-taker. By forecasting and utilizing technology and analytics, organizations can better align their consumption with the production profile, overcoming variability and ensuring efficient energy usage. And in terms of contractual commitment, while a PPA involves long-term agreements, that bring about stability in electricity pricing, they do limit flexibility to adapt to immediate market shifts. Nevertheless, this stability allows for predictable budgeting and can strategically be leveraged to enhance long-term operational planning, which of course can help organizations to craft plans that consistently align with broader business and energy goals, even as markets fluctuate. So overall, these challenges encourage innovation and strategic planning, enabling organizations to thrive by connecting sustainability goals with financial needs in this ever evolving and exciting energy landscape.
So moving on then to some of the PPA insights that we have here at PwC. Focusing again on buyers of PPAs, here are some select voices of buyers of PPAs or insights from our market interactions. Of course, the sustainability considerations have been showcased by the public examples that we've seen, but we also see this confirmed in the market interactions that we have had. And so it's not only in these three examples, but also more broadly within the industry. And we can, by digging a bit deeper, we can nuance the picture a bit further. So if we start on the left-hand side here of the slide, which is perhaps a bit more from a CFO's perspective, size of the contract is can be a first consideration for a buyer. So the volume in the contract needs to reflect well with the consumption profile of the buyer. So not to put too many eggs in one basket, for instance. And typically, if it's the first time that a buyer enters into a contract, it's advisable not to start too big. So focus on sourcing projects with a bit smaller volume first. And if we stay on this left-hand side of the slide, hedge accounting is also an important consideration that can be a bit tricky to realize at first sight. I won't go into too much detail here, but in short, it's advisable to involve the treasury function quite early when discussing PPAs, so that there are no adverse effects from the structure of the PPA on your accounting. Often times we see that PPAs are being initiated from a sustainability point of view or with a sustainability objective. But it's important to know, however, that there are some considerations from a reporting perspective that you should be aware of, or at least to account for. So we at PwC, of course, have experts in this field. And there are new rules entering into force in 2026, for example, which we are happy to tell you more about. But if we move over for now to the right-hand side, which is more of the sustainability considerations, we see that additionality is an important motivator for a lot of buyers. So as a buyer, you need to understand that timing is important. If you want to be able to say that you enabled new electricity and thus claim additionality, you want to enter into a PPA contract with a project that has not yet reached its final investment decision. And we at PwC are also happy to guide you through this and how you can create an effective sourcing strategy, focusing on projects in the right development stage of the right size, and also to help you find those projects in your local area. And lastly, we also see that location plays a role, particularly when it comes to solar PPAs, actually. Solar is typically quite favorably viewed by the public, so companies want to associate themselves with local solar initiatives. The most important as a buyer is obviously to buy electricity from a producing unit which is within the same electricity price area where you're located, so in SE3, for example. But being more geographically close than that, and having the geographical perspective in mind, can also play a part from a marketing perspective and stakeholder management perspective. So, to summarize, some key success factors for buyers of PPAs that we see is that it is important as a buyer to know your primary objective. Why are you sourcing PPAs? Is it to lower your Scope 2 emissions, or to stabilize energy prices, or to enhance your sustainability profile? This will help inform your sourcing strategy and your negotiations. You also want to involve the right internal resources and stakeholders at an early stage. So we had an example of the treasury function on the previous slide, but it can also be broader than that. So getting the organization on board with PPAs, especially if it's something new to you, can be a journey. And then once you enter into the negotiations, you want to avoid common pitfalls. PPAs can be complex, and the appropriate market standards has changed quite a bit in recent years. So knowing what is in your best interest requires important risk identification capabilities and industry knowledge and experience. So in order to make sure your PPA sourcing is a success, we at PwC are happy to assist you in that process.
Great. So moving over to a few key takeaways from this session before we enter into the Q&A. When dealing with the ups and downs of volatile electricity markets, choosing power purchase agreements ensures price stability. They bring a reliable, fixed pricing structure that remains steady over the contract term. They effectively shield you from market turbulence. Securing your energy prices through a PPA contract ensures steady budgeting and supports confident financial planning. And by signing PPA contracts, your company can also take a meaningful step towards achieving real environmental impact. PPAs align with environmental initiatives and meet regulatory standards, all while actively reducing your carbon footprint. Plus, by supporting additionality, they pave the way for new energy projects, boosting your company's sustainability profile. And with that, I would like to move over to a few questions. And let's see, Oskar, if you are able to help us guide through these questions. The first question here is, if I want to get started with a PPA, what's the first step? Do I need to already have a renewable project in mind, or how does it work?
So I think the first step is really to understand what is important to you as a company. So I think we alluded to it earlier in the presentation. And we have seen PPAs being initiated from different parts of the organization. So if it comes from CFO, for example, it might originate from a CFO doing a risk analysis of costs within the company and exposure to different risks, which of course we also can help out with such an analysis. And in that analysis, you may see that there's a large exposure to electricity prices. And in that case, you can start from a sort of quantitative perspective. So to see, for example, how much electricity do I consume? And out of this, how much is an appropriate share to hedge, taking different considerations into mind. And a lot of companies also have risk policies that you need to account for as well. So that is important if it comes from the CFO perspective. It could also come from the chief sustainability officer's perspective, or from a sustainability perspective, simply put. And here, obviously, I mean, as we touched upon in the presentation, it could be regarding the Scope 2 emissions, that you want to lower those and achieve more renewable electricity in your consumption mix. And then also, as we alluded to, if it's from a marketing or stakeholder management perspective, it can come from an analysis actually of what are the most important sort of image building drivers, or what is important for us here as a local stakeholder, for example, within the municipality or so.
In order to achieve sustainability goals or other...
Exactly, but also to align with the local authorities, help out with local stakeholder management. We see that these initiatives can help bolster local image quite a lot, and this is something that companies can value as well. So, but yeah, so this is sort of step one, and then step two obviously is to I mean, step one will inform your need. You start off with where you are in the organization and what your organization needs, and then step two is to see how that need matches with what is out there. So how the market looks, and there you need to obviously identify opportunities. And that, of course, we can also help out with this. If you want to be nearby, for example, it can be tricky to find a project which is of the right size, for instance. And it is not always that all projects that are being developed are widely known. So, but we are in constant dialogue, regular dialogue with a lot of energy developers. So we have quite intimate knowledge of what is going on in various parts of the Nordics. So this is definitely an area where we believe that we can help.
Great, and I do encourage everyone to continue to post questions using the QR code and post them in the chat, and we will attend to those questions as soon as possible as well. We continue. We are a pretty small company. Are PPAs even for us, or is this just a big company thing?
It's definitely not only a big company thing. It's not only for large industrial companies. We see PPAs being signed by a multitude of different companies. But as I sort of alluded to in the previous answer, it's important to start off with knowing your needs as a company. And the size of your company can obviously influence what you're looking for, and it's so important not to sort of overhedge, let's say, so to go too big. But renewable energy projects come in many different sizes. They can be very, very large, wind and hydro projects or so, and ranging to quite small, typically then solar projects, which is of a slightly lower volume. So there is definitely a lot of different approaches and answers here. And then obviously, it can also be that when you sit down and do your analysis, you arrive at the conclusion that there are other ways of also satisfying your energy needs. So we can obviously help you with that as well.
So in summary, PPAs come in all sizes and therefore are suitable for many different kinds of organizations and companies.
Exactly.
Great. Good to have that clarified. Next question. What happens if my company's energy needs change a lot during the contract? Am I stuck with the same terms? That's a tricky one.
Yes. So, I mean, it's obviously important. It's good to know this at the outset, that there is such a risk. Obviously, you can help it inform contract negotiations, and try to get some flexibility built into the contract. However, that can obviously then also come with some flexibility, can come with obviously a bit of a cost as well. And so since a seller typically wants to sign longer tenures, at least if we're talking about pay as produced contracts. So yeah, it could be, if you're concerned about this, it could be a good idea to start off small, to start with some lower volumes and learn from that first contract process and sourcing, and get more familiar with these types of risk and how you can manage them when securing even more of your volume once you know more about your long-term consumption profile.
Great, thank you. We continue. Here's another tricky question, but you seem to be having good answers so far, so let's continue. How do I know if a PPA will actually save us money in the end? What if market prices drop and we end up paying more? Could that happen?
Of course, anything can, or yeah, it could happen, of course. But I mean, it is important to realize that a PPA contract, as with any contract, you agree on a price and not the value. So you need to establish what is the value in this contract for you, because it won't be the same as for the seller. Value is something individual in negotiation. And in order for you to know what the value of this contract is, it's good to form a view of long-term prices. There are obviously quite a lot of providers of long-term market views out there, but it's important to have a view which aligns with your strategy and what you believe in your long-term, what your long-term beliefs are. And so we can obviously help you with that as well. So to make sure that we align your long-term, so that this can, so that you build a picture of the value of securing electricity, because that will then inform what the value is for you to secure this price.
So in the end, it's quite important to sort of factor in the value of the stability from the long-term contract rather than only looking at whether I will secure a lower price over the full contract period.
Exactly.
Which is, of course, great if you're able to do that from a buyer's perspective, less great if you're the seller, but just like in any longer-term contract, these are items you need to factor in.
Yes.
Okay. We'll continue on the topic of risk. What's the number one mistake companies make when signing their first PPA?
Oof. So I think it's hard to say that there is a common thread of mistakes, I guess. But I mean, actually, if we look back over the past few years, it's actually one thing that we have seen is actually more on the seller side, that unfavorable terms and structures of contracts have led some wind farms actually not being able to honor their contracts and going into restructuring. So as a result, so historically it's been actually, from what we've seen at least, more sellers that have suffered from sort of unfavorable terms than the buyers. But of course, there is a lot of nitty-gritty in these contracts, and it helps having seen contracts before and knowing what a typical market standard is in terms of risk exposure. And it is partly a bit of a new area. It's an evolving area, at least. So I believe that both buyers and sellers will tell you that they learned a lot from their first contract negotiations that they then incorporated into their second or like subsequent contract negotiations. But you know, these can be quite large contracts as well, so it's good to with a lot of money involved. So it's advisable to understand what is market practice. And since we've been involved in many of these deals, we're happy to inform you and help you in this process as well.
So experience makes you wise, as they say. Great. Okay, so here's another question. Any tips for convincing my CFO or the board that a PPA is a good idea, especially if they're nervous about signing up for something long term?
Right. Yes, I think we touched upon this a bit in the presentation as well. But as I think I alluded to earlier, involving the right people early is key here. We show that PPAs can be initiated from different parts of the organization, and I suspect that the person asking this question was perhaps from a different part of or a different function than finance, so maybe from a sustainability function, for example. And we know that some of these considerations that we have mentioned here can make can seem quite tricky. We've mentioned hedge accounting, these and some risk exposure terms can be quite tricky as well to understand and navigate if you haven't seen this before. But it's important to understand this consideration to address them head on to get the internal stakeholders on board. And it's important not to have this, it's sounding complex to stop you from taking the next step in your sustainability journey. So therefore, it's good that you understand what the CFO can be concerned about, so that you can address those concerns head on and how these risks can be mitigated. And as always, we're obviously happy to help you with that.
Okay, so I think that was the last question. If we didn't get around to answer your questions here, we will continue to do that in the chat. So please continue to ask questions in the chat, and we'll get around to answer those questions as quickly as possible. Thank you, Oskar, for joining us today, and thank you all in joining the webinar and for listening to us regarding PPAs. We hope this has sparked some interest and enthusiasm around power purchase agreements, and that this will be maybe the first step rather than the last step on your journey. Thank you so much.
Thank you.